This is Land of Havilah, Psalm 122. It's 9 verses. There are 15 psalms labeled in their first verses as a song of ascents. They're all in a row in an unbroken chain of 15 of them from Psalm 120 to Psalm 134. This is the third of those. So that there's no confusion when we read this one, let's mention a couple of things. In verse 3, David says, "Our feet are standing within your gates, Jerusalem." He's speaking to the city of Jerusalem, the city personified. The city was surrounded by a defensive wall, 1 Kings 3:1. And of course, the wall had gates. Thus, David said, "Our feet are standing within your gates," meaning we're standing in Jerusalem. In verse 4, David mentions the tribes, Yahweh's tribes, meaning the 12 tribes of Israel. There are 13 if we count Ephraim and Manasseh separately. Yahweh adopted all Israel to be his own, Exodus 19:5. In verse 4, the tribes go up to Jerusalem to give thanks to Yahweh's name according to an ordinance for Israel. The ordinance is in the law of Moses that, quote, 3 times in the year all your males shall appear before the Lord Yahweh, end quote. In David's lifetime there was no temple yet. The tabernacle Moses built was not far away in Gibeon, 1 Chronicles 16:39. But the tabernacle was Ichabod, meaning abandoned by Yahweh, 1 Samuel 4:21. However, God accepted David's moving of the ark to Jerusalem, so the tent David pitched for it, called David's tabernacle, had the ark. Since the ordinance didn't say show up at the tabernacle or show up at the temple, but rather for all the males to appear before Yahweh, and Yahweh was present with the ark, Exodus 25:22. Therefore the people of David's time were coming to Jerusalem to be in or near David's tabernacle to fulfill the ordinance in the law of Moses that they should appear before Yahweh 3 times a year. Yahweh said in Deuteronomy 12:5 not to put altars in every random place, quote, but to the place which Yahweh your God shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there. There you shall seek his habitation, and there you shall come, end quote. Since his habitation was with the ark, and the ark was in David's tabernacle, that's where they came. So that was a long explanation of why verse 4 of this psalm says Yahweh's tribes went up to Jerusalem in David's time. In verse 5, quote, there are set thrones for judgment, the thrones of David's house, end quote. In Israel, the king was supreme judge. The judicial system was under his authority. David handled difficult cases personally. So the set thrones for judgment, the thrones of David's house, in verse 5, are the judgment seats of Israel, especially David's own throne in his palace. He was responsible to enforce all Yahweh's ordinances in the law of Moses, one of which was to appear before Yahweh and give thanks to his name. We'll keep in mind when we read the psalm that Yahweh said he would put his name in Jerusalem forever, that he would dwell in Jerusalem forever, that the city would remain forever, and that it would be inhabited forever. 2 Kings 21:7, 1 Chronicles 23:25, Jeremiah 17:25, and Joel 3:20. And Yahweh said, but be glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem to be a delight, and her people a joy. Isaiah 65:18. And the Christ will reign from Jerusalem in the millennium. Isaiah 2, verses 2-4. And in eternity, when the present heaven and earth have been destroyed, God will create a new heaven and earth, and a new and magnificent Jerusalem will descend from heaven to earth. Revelation 21:1 and 2. So truly, Jerusalem is forever, and God has chosen for his name to be associated with Jerusalem forever. So when the psalm speaks of people dwelling in Jerusalem, going up to Yahweh there, and so forth, it all took place in the ancient past, but for us it's also in the future that we'll dwell in Jerusalem and go up to Yahweh there. And it speaks of our present citizenship there, even though we haven't seen it yet. Now the psalm, verse 1. A song of ascents by David. I was glad when they said to me, let's go to Yahweh's house. Our feet are standing within your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem that is built as a city that is compact together, where the tribes go up, even Yah's tribes, according to an ordinance for Israel, to give thanks to Yahweh's name. For there are set thrones for judgment, the thrones of David's house. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Those who love you will prosper. Peace be within your walls, and prosperity within your palaces. For my brothers' and companions' sakes, I will now say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of Yahweh our God, I will seek your good. Comment in verse 6, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Those who love Jerusalem will prosper. As far as specific things we should include in our prayers as commanded by God, God mandated prayers. Several come to mind. Jesus said when you pray, pray like this. Then he gave the Lord's Prayer, our Father who art in heaven, and so on. So we should pray the Lord's Prayer, or along those lines. And Jesus said, pray that the Lord of the harvest will send workers into the harvest, Matthew 9:38, meaning that God would send evangelists to preach to the lost and send anyone who might help with the harvest to us in any way. And Jesus said, pray for those who mistreat you and persecute you, Matthew 5:44. Jesus said, watch and pray that you don't enter into temptation, Matthew 26:41. Jesus said, watch, keep alert, and pray, for you don't know when the time of his coming will be, Mark 13:33. And then there's this mandated prayer in verse 6 of this psalm, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But the mandates aren't burdensome, 1 John 5:3. God moves in our hearts, so we naturally want to pray exactly as he commanded us. So we pray for the peace of Jerusalem and its prosperity. Psalm 123 is next.